Well, a very good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from around the world today. A very warm welcome to our special travel and tourism debate from Euronews. This is a third in our special series in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still obviously engulfing the world right now. This particular debate is called Asia-Europe Tourism, a long-haul recovery. And today we are going to be concentrating on Asia and Europe and the links between the two continents and how the pandemic has affected not only business travel, but also tourism as well. What are some of the challenges ahead as some countries start to reopen, start to ease some border restrictions, and how are things going to move on from here? How can some countries recover in Asia that have been particularly badly affected by this pandemic? If you've got any questions for the panel that I'm just about to introduce in a moment, then please do leave them in the chat box just below the video screen where you're watching our live stream this morning, and I'll get those to our panel throughout this debate in the next 60 minutes or so. We've had lots of questions already in on social media, including our Instagram platform on Euronews, so thank you very much indeed for sending those in. I'll get to those as and when I can during the debate. So without further ado, let's introduce our guests that we have for you this morning. First of all, in Shanghai, we have Jane Ji Sun, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Trip.com. Good evening to you in Shanghai.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to see you there in Shanghai today. Also in Brussels, we have Flor Diaz Pulido, who's the head of unit for aviation policy at the European Commission. It's good morning to you in Brussels.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you for inviting us today.
No problem at all. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Flor, in Brussels. We're also hoping to have a guest in Sri Lanka this morning, Kamali Fernando, who's the chairperson of Sri Lanka Tourism. Hopefully she'll be joining us in the next few minutes or so. So the COVID-19 pandemic continues to engulf the world in different ways right now, doesn't it? Some countries have, made some improvements in their infection rates. Some countries are opening up their borders, increasing tourism once again, but there are still some countries around the world that are particularly badly affected. As I was saying earlier on, we're going to be concentrating today mainly on Europe and Asia and the links between the two countries. Tourist arrivals in the Asia-Pacific region in the first quarter of this year were down by more than a third. So the COVID-19 pandemic had a massive impact on the Asia-Pacific region, and the overall predictions for the global impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on travel and tourism are much greater, obviously. So how can travel and tourism recover in Asia and Europe over the coming months? What preparations and precautions are being put in place to welcome back travellers and tourists? And can things really get back to some sort of sense of normality anytime soon? Jane Ji Sun, Chief Executive Officer of Trip.com in Shanghai. Let's just bring you in here. Just first of all, if people don't know what Trip.com is, what do you actually do?
Yeah, Trip.com is the largest online travel company in China. We have about 400 million active users and about 40,000 employees in the global places. We offer hotel, air ticket, vacation package, cruise, rental car, etc. Anything you need for your travel, we have these products to support our customers.
So Jane, obviously your business must have been really quite badly affected by the pandemic because, of course, the pandemic, the epicenter of that was in Asia, was in China right at the beginning of the year. How bad has it been for you so far?
Yeah, China was the first country who was impacted by the coronavirus. So I remember during the Chinese New Year, when we get the order that we need to lock down the border, try to prevent the spread of the virus by canceling all the trips abroad right before the Chinese New Year peak starts. It was very, very difficult. But thankfully, we reached out to our global partners, and they were very kind to support us to calm down our customers. So the first 2 months was very difficult. And on March the 5th, we launched our first revival plan for the domestic travel business. And so far, we have seen the recovery for different business lines have shown positive trajectory. So we work very hard with our business partners and our customers, try to lead the recovery of the domestic China business.
It must have been a massive shock in those early weeks, those early months when China was going into lockdown. I mean, in your long established career in this particular industry, I guess you had never seen anything like it before.
Right. No, the analogy we used was it's almost fighting a war. So when I was trying to reach out to the global CEOs for hotel chains, for airline CEOs, at the beginning they didn't know what's going on in China, and I told them, it's just like fighting the Second World War. And I really respect Churchill and Roosevelt and the leaders in these countries really lead the whole country to fight a very tough war. That's how bad it was during the first couple of months.
Okay, Jane, thanks for that for now. Let's go over to Floor at the European Commission, a specialist in aviation policy there in Brussels. Floor, Jane was talking about sort of fighting a war there. Is it fair to say that the airlines have been fighting a war over this? Because obviously the COVID-19 pandemic has grounded European aviation, global aviation. It's been a nightmare for the industry, hasn't it?
Indeed, it has been a nightmare for airlines, for airports, for everybody working in the aviation industry. We have been down to 90% low the level that in 2019, and broadly speaking, we are still very far for recovery, even half of the traffic we had at this point in time last year. So indeed, I agree with Jane. It has been a huge impact in the industry and a catastrophe in general for the sector.
And it's also exposed quite a few problems within the aviation industry, hasn't it? Because some airlines, one or two in the UK that I know of have gone bust. Others have had to take a lot of state support, financial rescue plans. It seems like airlines were kind of living on the edge almost, and this kind of was tipping some of them over that edge.
Indeed. It is, I think the impact on both the tourism sector and the aviation sector has been among the biggest in all the economy. And here in the European Union, we have put together a package of financial measures to try to help airlines and airports and the hotels to get liquidity. There is a clear problem with cash liquidity, and to try to keep jobs and to try to secure the jobs in the future. As Jane was mentioning, the first 2 months where we were fully into the pandemic, they were really very, very complicated. Now we are moving towards the exit and the recovery phases, and we hope that with the measures that we are putting in place, we can help the industry to get there. But clearly, there will be a restructure in the industry, and new trends will have to emerge, and we need to be prepared for that future way of traveling together.
Okay, Floor, thanks very much indeed for now. If you're just tuning in, you're watching Euronews' virtual debate, the latest in our series on travel and tourism in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. This one's called Asia-Europe Tourism, a long-haul recovery, and we're focusing on the links between Asia and Europe in terms of business travel and also tourism as well. If you have any questions for the guests that you can see on the screen here, leave them in the chat box below the video where you're watching, and I'll get some of those questions to our panelists a bit later on. So, Jane, if we can go back to you in Shanghai at trip.com, we were hearing Floor mentioning there about how devastating this has been for the aviation industry, particularly in Europe, where Floor is obviously based. You talked earlier about, first of all, domestic tourism in China and how that's starting to kind of move back towards some sort of future. What's it been like for aviation in China and Asia more generally? Because I guess that's the key to kind of your business, right?
Yes, air business is very important for our business travelers and high-end leisure travelers. So at the beginning, aviation recovered slowly, recovered by 10%, 20%. By the end of yesterday, I have seen our business have recovered almost fully for the aviation business, for domestic piece.
And in terms of sort of where you're at right now as a business in terms of travel and tourism, you're talking about the domestic market there, but how about sort of your international business, for example, with Europe?
Yeah, for international business within continent Europe, we have seen some recovery. Some of the business lines are already show strong numbers of search. Point-to-point products start to pick up some momentum, but cross-border transactions are still very limited because different countries have applied different restrictions in terms of cross-border transactions. So our vision right now is domestic China recover the first, and then domestic China within big markets such as domestic Europe, domestic USA, domestic Australia, and domestic Canada might pick up some momentum within their domestic scope. And then later on, hopefully with the vaccines or medicine, the advancement in the science field, that will enable our customers to go across the borders.
Okay, Jane, thank you very much indeed for now in Shanghai. Well, I'm pleased to introduce our third guest from Sri Lanka, Kamali Fernando, who's the chairperson of Sri Lanka Tourism. Hello and welcome to the debate, Kamali.
Hi, Damon. Quick correction. Due to an unavoidable circumstance, Mrs. Kimali Fernando is unable to join with us at the moment. On behalf of her, I will be joining. I'm Parami Fernando, Head of Media and Comms for Sri Lanka Tourism. So I will be participating on the debate on behalf of her due to a really unavoidable circumstance.
Okay.
She can't join at the moment, but hopefully we are expecting her shortly.
Okay, so you're Parvi.
Yep.
Parvi. Your name is Parvi?
Sorry?
Your name is Parvi?
Parami. It's P-A-R-A-M-I. Yes.
Okay. So Parni, if you wouldn't mind, I know that you sort of jumped in the hot seat, so to speak, and thank you for doing that over the coming sort of minutes. Can you just give us an idea? We were just talking about there how the COVID-19 pandemic has in general affected travel and tourism. We were hearing from Jane in China. We've been hearing from Flor in Brussels about how it's impacted flying and aviation. Just give us an overall perspective really from Sri Lanka about how devastating this pandemic has been for your country.
It's indeed have been really devastating because about 500,000 jobs tourism was generating in Sri Lanka, and about we had in 2018 we had about 2.3 million international tourist arrivals to the country, and unfortunately about 100,000 to 150,000 per month. We used to get international tourist arrivals, and unfortunately since April, the count is 0 at the moment, which is quite devastating. And so Sri Lanka tourism has a lot of private sector establishments who are all like medium and small and medium entrepreneurs. So they are in grave situation. They're in a really sad situation at the moment because we have closed the airport since, if I'm not mistaken, since April, and the dates are not quite decided yet due to the pandemic. And but domestic tourism, for a certain extent, is helping the situation. But unfortunately, it has been really quite bad for the tourism industry, if you ask.
And in terms of sort of international travelers and tourists coming to Sri Lanka, how big a part are they of your tourism economy? You were talking about domestic tourism being an important part, but clearly international visitors, international arrivals are a big part of your tourism economy normally as well, right?
Yes. So tourism is the third highest foreign exchange earner in Sri Lanka at the moment. We are looking into going into number 2. Hopefully it was this year that we were supposed to go to number 2. And also about 5% of the GDP is generated from the tourism industry in Sri Lanka. So it definitely plays a major role in the economy of the country. Also, it's Sri Lanka is beautiful and it has a lot of potential that we are looking into developing as well. So it most definitely plays a huge role when it comes to the economy, especially in aiding small and medium entrepreneurs and the businesses.
Pani, obviously a few years back now, your country was one of those affected by the tsunami, which caused a damage to your country. Obviously, this is a different kind of crisis, but how were you able to recover from things like the tsunami, and how do you think your learning from that kind of thing may help you with this crisis in terms of reviving tourism, getting people to come back to your country?
Actually, if you see, Sri Lanka has been quite a resilient country when it comes to crisis, wars, attacks. Like last year, we had the unfortunate Easter Sunday attack, and within about 3 to 4 months, we recovered. And if you like take the international tourist arrival as a whole, in 2018, before the attacks, it was 2.3 million international travelers. And after the Easter Sunday attack, the 2019, we were able to go to 1.9 million target. So though there was a break in between for 2 to 3 months, we were able to achieve that target. So
Okay.
it's nothing new for us, but we have been facing, like after the war, tourism escalated. But over the years, we have faced floods, wars, terrorist attacks. So we are definitely like the government with the private sector holders and stakeholder associations are definitely working together. So we are united in all the crises that's coming our way.
Okay, Pani, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll come back to you in a moment. Let's go back to Brussels at the heart of the European Union and Flor Diaz-Pulido, who's in the aviation unit there at the European Commission. Flor, clearly when you hear from countries like Sri Lanka, it really brings it to life, doesn't it? The impact that the pandemic has had on travel and tourism in these countries that really do depend on it for their economies. You know, when you're sat at the European Commission in Brussels trying to think about how to revive travel in terms of flying, you know, not only within Europe, but also internationally, it's kind of a difficult psychological and sort of health and safety balance, if you like, isn't it? Because I guess tomorrow you'd love to have all the planes flying back to all those countries, but you can't, can you?
Exactly. I think that, can you still hear me and can you still see me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Indeed, like a little bit like Jane explained before for China, in the European Union, we focused first at the beginning on trying to reopening our internal borders to facilitate transport and aviation within our borders. But you may know that on the 30th of June, so around 15 days ago, we have already adopted a recommendation. The Council of the European Union adopted a recommendation to allow start traveling with international borders. A list of 14 countries were included there, and 3 Asian countries are already part of that list: Thailand, Japan, and South Korea. This list will be reviewed every 50.
Flor, China was on that list. Well, it was being considered, wasn't it? But it had to be a reciprocal agreement. You don't have that yet, do you?
Exactly. We to get into that list, you need to follow a set of criteria, epidemiological criteria, containment measures, some social and economic criteria, and reciprocity is a big one. Mainly when we are talking about such a big market as it is the Chinese market for the European Union and the European Union for China. So we are looking forward at the moment where China will open their international borders to us, and then I think the Council of the European Union would think about doing the same. But as I said, the list is reviewed every 15 days. It is a dynamic list, and our intention is to keep working to open international borders as soon and as much as we can.
Okay, thanks for that, Flor. Jane, let's go back to you in Shanghai, Chief Executive Officer at Trip.com. You heard there from the centre of the European Commission, you know, if China is willing to open up its borders to the EU is likely to follow suit and put you on that sort of list of countries that people can travel to in and out of Asia into Europe. How important is it that that happens now?
Oh, very important. I think, first of all, 10% of the GDP are coming or associated with travel industry, and about 9 to 10% of the job opportunities are from the travel-related business. So to encourage people to travel is very important for the revival of the economy. However, the precondition is that people need to be traveling within the safe environment. So the next challenging question for us as an industry needs to be addressed is that how safe we can make sure our customers are travel within our scope of the travel platform. So what we have noticed are the 3 trends our customer prefer after COVID-19. The first one is the product we present needs to demonstrate to be very safe. So for example, for hotels who are able to offer temperature taking, test taking, sanitation, these hotels normally get lots of business. The second thing is people prefer to travel within much smaller group, such as their family, their good friends, rather than bigger group. Thirdly, people prefer to choose the product with lots of flexibility. So cancelable, refundable product gets much favored over the other product, which has a very rigid policy. So these are the new trend we have seen so far. So we're working very hard with our business partners to offer the product that is suitable and favored by our customers in this new environment post-COVID-19.
Of course, we're living in a new normal right around the world there. And you talked about, Jane, having this sort of safe environment, safe products. This all kind of links in, doesn't it, to this crisis of confidence? Because while there is still a health crisis going on, there's also a crisis of confidence in terms of getting people sort of to travel again and to go on holiday. People still worry about that. And I think people in particular, maybe in Europe, worry about going to Asia because it was at the start of the pandemic there, and people might think, oh, no, I'm not sure about going there. I mean, how can you reassure people as a business that actually now they can go to some places and they should feel more confident?
Yeah, so we look at the death rate and the newly infected population number very carefully. So, for example, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, these countries have demonstrated a very good ability to control the newly infected number, and the death rate is very low. So for these countries, customers, business travelers, customers feel a little bit more confident to travel to compared to the other regions, which probably doesn't have good statistics in the newly infected numbers or death rate.
Okay, Jane, thanks for that for now. You're watching Asia-Europe Tourism, a long-haul recovery, a virtual debate from Euronews. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I can see Michelle, Gaps and Nimesh have joined us watching live. Thank you very much indeed for your questions. I'll get round to those in a moment or so. And if you have any questions for our panel today, do leave them in the box just below the video where you're watching. If we can just go back to Sri Lanka and Pani there that's standing in for the chairperson of Sri Lanka Tourism. We talked about safety there and confidence. As I know Sri Lanka isn't opening quite yet to international tourists, but how are you preparing to reopen and to reassure people that when they come to Sri Lanka in the future that it will be safe? What are you doing?
So to begin with, in the beginning of May, we actually launched a complex document on Sri Lanka tourism operational guidelines for the accommodation sector, travel agents, on how you should be, the precautions you must take when hosting international travelers or local travelers before opening our hotels and restaurants to the domestic tourists. So it has been working quite fine. We actually consulted during the months of March and April to be able to prepare ourselves into the future. We actually consulted all the stakeholders, and we, with the recommendations from the Ministry of Health, UN World Health Organization, we compiled a very detailed document on Sri Lanka tourism operational guidelines for service providers. So every single thing from the restaurant to hotel to travel agent, if you go through it from homestays, everything is in detailed, and we have circulated that among our stakeholders as well. So all the precautions, already we have very strict precautions to abide by. Like if you take like a normal citizen, if they don't wear masks, the government has instructed to arrest them even. It's that very strict guidelines we follow at the moment. So yes.
So there's lots going on. I think a lot of people would be worried that if they come to international long-haul destinations in the future, they might worry that what happens if they get the coronavirus in some way, either en route or during their stay there? What happens if a second wave hits the country while they're there? And we had a question actually from a gentleman called Alan Lamour, and he was saying, what happens if you're traveling and a second wave hits? I mean, what would happen if an international traveler was in your country and suddenly there was another outbreak of coronavirus?
Okay, so I'll answer that question in two parts. So at the moment, the protocol for international tourists who are going to come to Sri Lanka, they they are subjected to 3 PCR tests. Actually, we've got quite a lot of complaints, I would say, saying that, the precautions are too extreme. But we want to protect Sri Lanka. Is right now the COVID-19 patients are under 3,000. It's from March to up to now, we have been able to keep it under 3,000. So when they board the flight, they have to have a PCR test, which is valid for 72 hours. And then once they land at the airport in Sri Lanka, they'll have to go through another PCR test.
What's
and
a PCR
only
test? What does PCR?
Sorry?
What does PCR mean?
That is the COVID-19 test. That hold on, let me just get you the proper.
Oh, no, you don't have to give me a definition. That's fine, as long as
yes, that is a COVID-19 medical test that you have to do. Okay. So you get the results within 24 hours. And also we have a minimum days stay. Earlier you could come to Sri Lanka for 2 to 3 days, but right now we have about 5 days minimum stay. And if you're staying more than for 5 days, about maybe say 10 days, you'll have to go through one more PCR test. And we have restricted movement. Public transportation is not allowed, because if a tourist has COVID-19, and it will be, we are trying to avoid community spread. So we have restricted the public transportation at the moment for international tourists. So that's one aspect. And also if they're here and they get the corona, the second wave hits. So I would like to refer, when the first the spread happened, we actually took certain measures that we will like replicate the same, or probably. So we allowed, there were about, I think, 70,000 foreign tourists in Sri Lanka by March 12th, when UN World Health Organization informed that COVID-19 is a pandemic. So we immediately got in touch with the foreign ministries, foreign embassies here, and we tried to send as many as possible people back to their home countries. And there was a strict curfew in the country, and during that time they were allowed to use their air tickets to get to the airport. And also a lot of service providers, in the true spirit of hospitality, a lot of service providers offered to keep these foreign tourists at their establishments free of charge, actually. And also stakeholder organizations launch a program called National Host and Observation Program, where they traveled across the country with heavy precautions, went to see them, brief them about what is happening, connect them with their home embassies, etc. So I think if a second wave comes, most definitely we would replicate the same, and we'll be in close contact. Also, we launched a website because called Tourist Expatriate Support Center back in April, where the whoever is in foreign travelers who are in the country could register with us and tell their if they have any help requests or any queries, they could write to us, and we would direct it to the relevant embassy or the person. So we could we have answered about close to 500 help requests. So that's how we are planning to I think we handled it quite well, I would say, during the first wave. And if there is a second one, we would do the same, I would say.
Okay, Pani, thank you very much indeed for that. Very detailed, and obviously you're doing a lot in Sri Lanka to adapt to the new normal. Thank you very much indeed for that. For now, let's go back to Floor at the European Commission at the Aviation Policy Unit there. Floor, this is not only about adapting in these tourism destinations and making tourism visitors feel welcome. It's obviously all about getting people there, flying. A lot of people have sent in questions on our social media platforms about how safe it is to get on an aeroplane. Before I come to a couple of those questions, we did a digital poll at Euronews on our social media, and we asked the question, with health protection measures in place, would you feel confident about going on a long-haul holiday this summer, which would obviously involve flying in most cases? 26.6% said yes, they would feel confident about going on a long-haul holiday this summer with precautions in place, but 60.5% said they wouldn't. 12.9% said they were unsure. So nearly 2/3 of the people that responded said they weren't confident enough to go on a long-haul holiday, to fly away for tourism this summer. How much is that part of your considerations at the European Commission about reopening borders and trying to get the aviation industry back to some sort of sense of normality?
Yes, indeed. If I may, I will divide your question in two parts. First is how safe it is to travel by air, and then it is, and I think this is a legitimate fear by a lot of citizens, and part of the question the citizen asked you before is how sure I can be that I will be repatriated in case of a second wave.
Sure.
So the first one regarding the air travel, I think it is important that everybody remember that aviation is the safest mode of transport worldwide. Safety is in our ADN. It is part of what we do every day to ensure that our planes are safe and to ensure that our people land and take off and travel safely. And in that sense, both in the European Union, EASA and our European Centre of Diseases, and ICAO as well, a set of guidelines to ensure a safe way of recovery air transport have been published. The both sets of rules, the EASA, the European ones and the international ones, are very similar and they are compatible. So that work has already been taking place. It is as safe as it is possible within a pandemic, but it is safe to travel right now. And I think it is important to transmit this confidence to the passengers. If you follow all the rules and all the recommendations that have been put in place now, you keep the social distance, you wear the mask, the aviation industry is doing their utmost and the utmost to make sure that you can travel safe. And then regarding the second question, I can travel safe, but what if there is a second crisis there? Who reassure me that I can come back? I think it is important for everybody to understand that even for those countries, third countries, where travel restrictions are still in place, there will always be a number of citizens which will be exempted of the restrictions, so that we will be able to go back home. And clearly, for instance, for us, European citizens traveling abroad will always be able to come back to the European Union. The same it will be for long-term residents. So even if you are a citizen of a third country, but you have your residence in the European Union, you will be able to come back. So we hope that with all these sets of rules and recommendations, we will build the necessary confidence from the citizen to change the 60%, 26 now, into the opposite 60%, trusting us, the aviation people, the aviation sector, that we can bring you safely home as we have always done in the past.
Because you can appreciate the anxieties, can't you? Because, I mean, on the face of it, people are being sort of locked into a tube flying in the air with a load of strangers, and they don't know whether the person next to them might have coronavirus. So clearly people do worry about that. And of course, they do worry that if a second wave hits, what happens if they are in a destination? I know you're not a scientist, Flora, and I'm not going to ask you to give me scientific evidence, but in some of the questions we've had from our audience here on social media and on Instagram, actually, about sort of safety on planes. There was one saying, do we keep our masks on for the entire duration of the flight? Will it be more difficult, more expensive, more stressful? If you get tested after a flight and it's negative, do you still need to quarantine in some countries? Do we keep our masks on, again, for the entire duration of the flight? How safe is it to take a flight? Does the virus have more chance to spread of the environment of inside a plane? I mean, you can see the pattern here, can't you? People are really worried about this.
Indeed. I would say that for most of these questions, the answers are already in the guidelines, as I mentioned before. First of all, we in the European Union, we consider that individual measures are more efficient than border restrictions. We need to ensure that people wear masks. We need to ensure that the containment measures, the distance, is respected as much as it is possible. In the planes, the air is renewed, and there is a lot of health protection in planes. There was already before, and it is even more now. You know that new measures have been put in place to disinfect the planes on a daily basis. I do not know all the guidelines by heart, either the Europeans or the ICAO ones, but I am sure that the European airlines are respecting all of them, and they are doing their utmost to make sure that taking a plane is as safe as it can be, as I said during the pandemic. But indeed, I know that the industry is highly committed. As Parmi from Sri Lanka was mentioning before, everybody is highly committed in the industry to make sure that traveling by plane is as safe now as it is possible and almost as safe as it was before.
Okay, Flora, the European Commission, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go back to Shanghai in China. Jane Ji Sun, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Trip.com. Jane, we're talking about this sort of crisis of confidence here, whether people feel confident to go on holiday, they worry about what might happen if there's a second wave, they worry about flying. What would you say about all of that? I mean, why should we be considering about traveling this summer?
Yeah, I think within China, people feel very safe for a couple of reasons. The people are very well trained during this crisis. So no matter where you go, now we are wearing masks when you are in a public area, and people tend to wash their hands, sanitize their hands very carefully, maintaining good social distancing. So it's part of our normal life right now. So from that end, I think the general population are used to the new protocols.
How about Jane, though, Chinese and Asian tourists that, I know come to Europe in large crowds every year, to places like the UK and what have you. How do you think Chinese Chinese tourists are feeling right now about coming to Europe? Clearly, there are difficulties in terms of border restrictions, but do you think that they would want to come to Europe now?
Yeah, so in terms of the group, I think, as I said before, people now are changing from a bigger group tourists to a much smaller group. They prefer to travel within the small group, such as their family or a group of their good friends. These are the new format they are following. And then in terms of traveling to the Europe, I think the interest is very high. The demand is very high. When we look at the search volume, the volume is very high. However, we need to take it from the total lockdown to then nearby city travel. And then yesterday, the government opens up for a state to state, city to city, long distance travel. And hopefully later on, the cross-border transactions between countries will be more opened up. And also, I think the government are also becoming more and more experienced in handling the outbreak. So when Wuhan was the first city which had the outbreak, so the government took very decisive measures to lock down the city to make sure the curve is down. So far, it worked quite well. Now, a few weeks ago, Beijing had a few, maybe 20, 30 people who got infected. And another practice within Beijing has been proven very effective. So with these practice, I think right now, the government has more experience and the general population have more confidence in traveling within China.
Okay, Jane, I'm just going to put a question to you that we've had from one of our audiences watching live our virtual debate today, Gazmend Haxia. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in. Gazmend is asking, do you have any strategic insights as to what else Europe-based tour operators need to do to attract Chinese tourists back to Europe? What do you think the Europe-based tour operators need to do?
Yeah, we're working a lot with our global partners. I think, first of all, safety is the number one concern. So we welcome all our partners to join us for the Safety Alliance to follow certain prototype. So, for example, when you enter into the hotel, there are measures you can take to make sure the temperature is taken. In the lobby, public area, people are wearing masks. And then they offer hand sanitation to make sure the general population that enter into the hotels are very well protected. The second thing is also a lot of hotels are having high vacancies. So what we do with our partners is that have the customers to work on the prepaid model, so the perishable inventory can be utilized during the slow season, and our customers are offered quite good incentives to prepay for certain products that have been proven very well. And third one is the rental car business, RV car business have seeing a lot of pickup because people can isolate within the rental car. They feel very safe. And RV car, they are surrounded by the people they know well. So again, that gives them this confidence to travel around.
Okay, Jane, thanks for that. Floor, can we just go back to you in Brussels quickly? Gazmend Haxia, our viewer here, the same gentleman that asked the question before, they're asking, what are plausible scenarios time-wise when Chinese tourists will return to Europe? Floor, I know you mentioned earlier that China has to lift its international restrictions, and then there'll be a reciprocal arrangement possibly in Europe. But when do you hope that those sort of aviation travel connections could be reconnected with China and Europe?
Unfortunately, I cannot give you an answer for that. I can tell you that for us in Europe, the Asian market and the Chinese market especially is very important. We know that one in every 5 trips that the European we make it to Asia and notably to China and vice versa. So for us, we have a truly interest in recover as soon as possible these international connections. But as I mentioned before, we need to follow the epidemiological criteria that they are set up in the Council recommendation. We need to ensure that there is all the containment measures in place. And as Jane was mentioning before, this safety is as important for China as it is important for the European Union. And we need to make sure that they are as able to provide us with these safety measures as they need to be sure that we are able as well. So I think that is for a different context, but we are working on that clearly as soon as possible.
Floor, we also had a question in on Instagram from Alex Nialis. Thank you very much indeed for your question. This is going back to the point of flying and how safe it is right now, which we were talking about a few moments ago. They're asking, is flying safer than taking a long distance train on holiday?
I will start by repeating that aviation, traveling by air is, and it has been for many years, the safest mode of transport. In aviation, we know the huge impact that any accident related to a plane has worldwide. And we know that the confidence of the travelers, you take years to build and just one accident or 1 week to lose. So in that sense, the aviation industry is fully committed to have the highest standards. And as I said before, there are special ways to purify and to renew the air in the planes. And there is a lot of health measurements putting in place. If you tell me if I can compare exactly how accurate it can be saving traveling by plane or traveling by high-speed train, I think it is really impossible to say. It's like asking me, is going to the supermarket more safer than going in a high-speed train? It's not possible to compare. We are making our best to ensure that both modes of transport are equally safe. And with this mentality is with the one that we are opening our borders and that we are encouraging people to travel by air again.
Okay, thanks, Floor. Pani, we go back to you at Sri Lanka Tourism in Sri Lanka. Thanks again for joining us in this virtual debate. You talked earlier about how the COVID-19 pandemic has really impacted very hard the travel and tourism sector in Sri Lanka. So what's your focus now in terms of trying to reopen Sri Lanka? We had one question, for example, from Sylvain Nambot on our social media platform saying, do you think that countries will now continue to invest in advertising campaigns to boost tourism? So what is your strategy now to market Sri Lanka to get back the tourists that you once had before?
Yes, actually, we are sort of looking into this as a turning point for Sri Lanka tourism, where we are looking into rebranding ourselves in the global market, where earlier, like, it was more tourists and more tourists who would rather spend maybe not much of this expenditure was very less. So we are looking into high spending tourists and with more days spending in Sri Lanka. So we are sort of looking into rebranding ourselves as well, and also expanding more into European and American markets, apart from the usual, like our top 5 markets include India, China, UK, Russia, and Germany. So we are sort of looking into rebranding. We are looking into the situation from that perspective. And also we are working on a national roadmap with United Nations Development Program, where we consult with all the stakeholders, and we try to improve the situations and so on. So in short, it's rebranding.
So you're taking a positive out of a very big negative, obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic, a turning point you describe for Sri Lanka. So clearly you see that there are opportunities here actually going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are looking into launching a 5-year global marketing campaign across the world. Like we're planning to hire PR agencies across the world and customize it according to each market and so on. But we are just on hold at the moment because of the situation, and we were supposed to open the airport on August 1st, but we are focused more on bringing down Sri Lankans right now at the moment. So according to that, we don't have a date yet, but as soon as things go back to normal, hopefully soon, we are planning to launch the global campaign and kickstart our rebranding process.
Okay, well, good luck with that, Pani. Thank you very much indeed. Let's, Jane, go back to you at Trip.com in Shanghai. We talked about there, didn't we, sort of, reinventing tourism, rebranding tourism, it being a turning point, opportunities, will countries invest now more in advertising and promotional campaigns? How are you trying to kind of, promote the services that you do? I think you've been doing a lot of live streaming, haven't you?
Yes, very much so. So we are inventing a lot of methods to attract the new customers, younger customers. So, for example, we're using live streaming to reach out to the customers which prefer to use videos, live streaming as a new method, as a marketing tool. And so far, it's very successful.
Give us an example of what you do in the live streaming then.
In the live streaming, our chairman is actually leading the way. So, for example, he just went to Tibet, and he will in Tibet and showing the beautiful sceneries in Tibet. And meanwhile, we will reach out to our hotel partners, and some of the hotels have very low occupancy rate. So rather than have these inventory wasted, we'll ask them to take out these inventories, and we will ask our customers to prepay for these hotel rooms in case their kids are on vacation, Chinese New Year is coming, they can use these coupons for future usages. And meanwhile, in return, they will be able to get a very good discount for these high-end products.
So they can buy things that they can use in the future, and they have the sort of reassurance that they can use it when they can use it.
Right, and it's win-win because these these hotels are suffering from the low occupancy rate, so they're using the perishable inventory in exchange of the cash advancement from the customers. And on the customer side, normally these hotels are very expensive, but now they can get it within a very reasonable price.
Okay, Jane, thanks very much indeed for that. Flor, let's go back to you at the European Commission on Aviation Policy in Brussels. This kind of flexibility, I suppose, is really at the heart of encouraging people to travel and go on holiday again, isn't it? Because people want to know that if they do spend money or they do buy something or prepay for something, that if things do go wrong in terms of a second wave or they can't travel, that there is some flexibility in terms of them either getting their money back or being able to travel again. I don't need to tell you, obviously, particularly in Europe, there's been a whole fiasco, hasn't there, with some airlines where people have been complaining that they've not got their money back, they've been offered vouchers when they should have got the cash sort of refund. That hasn't really helped, has it?
Indeed, it has happened not only in Europe, it has happened worldwide. The problem with the lack of liquidity of airlines is a global problem, and it's logical because nobody could expect such a crisis. And I mentioned it before for the tourism industry as well, the lack of liquidity, the lack of cash money, of cash flow on airlines to be able to reimburse the millions of tickets to the millions of passengers who were about to travel in March, April, and May, when it was impossible to travel, clearly put the airlines in a difficult situation. You know that in Europe we have the regulation on passenger rights, and passengers have a right to get their money back. It's true that under the current circumstances, which are exceptional and are not at all due to the will of the airlines, airlines have been offering vouchers. We in Brussels, the European Commission issued a recommendation to airlines and to member states where we try to bring both sides to the best understanding. So first of all, passengers, they need to choose the voucher. Airlines cannot impose the voucher on passengers. And secondly, we are trying to make sure that the vouchers are secure enough for the passengers so that you can use them in a reasonable amount of time, that you will get your money back, etc.
Flora, I just also want to ask you about the kind of looking forward, really, the challenges to aviation. Obviously, people do have a fear around safety and confidence. We've already talked about that. But for example, Antonio Ferreira Caspas, who sent in a question before this debate, was saying traveling only for a vacation is wrong. There's so much to do in your own country. It's just as beautiful to sort of travel around your homeland. Do you think this whole pandemic has made people really think about how much they do travel? I know some people have to travel for business, but maybe they won't do so much in the future. And maybe people won't travel so far in the future. They may have discovered things in their own countries. This is about sustainable flying, aviation, the environment, climate. It's kind of brought this all back to the surface, hasn't it?
Indeed, indeed. And here in the European Union, we are persuaded that we need to make the future way of traveling after COVID as sustainable as possible. It was already in the priorities of our Commission, of our European government, but it is even more now. We are making sure that all the financial opportunities that are going around now, I mentioned them before, there is the recovery fund, there is the possibility to guarantee the loans. We are trying to attach them to a sustainability criteria to make sure that we take, as Parmi was saying, there will be new opportunities out of this crisis. We need to secure these opportunities. We need to grow into a new way of traveling that will be as sustainable as possible. But having said that, connectivity is key. We need to remember that people, they open their minds when traveling. They are confronted to very different realities. It is not only the economic opportunities for the regions to develop, it is for human beings to understand other ways of living and open our minds and become much more tolerant. So traveling is important. Don't say that we can just go nearby and that's it. I think traveling long haul, international traveling is key for the globalization, to have a healthy and sustainable globalization.
Okay, Flor, we're running out of time. Just got a few minutes left. Let's just go back to Pani in Sri Lanka. Pani, just a final thought from you, really briefly, about what you hope now happens as a country in terms of reviving tourism. Where do you go from here?
So at the moment, since international tourism, it's on hold, we are looking into developing the sectors, especially small and medium and business owners, enterprises in Sri Lanka itself. So actually, if you take, we got a grant from the European Union, about a 22 million grant, and about 3.5 million euros have been allocated for the development of the tourism industry. So we are looking into investing that money to for small and medium entrepreneurs, where we can train them on management skills, so on, and create a product. We're actually looking into creating a wellness tourism product at the moment, since with the whole COVID situation, indigenous medicine is quite famous in Sri Lanka. So we want to take that indigenous medicine system to the world. So we are working with them and Ministry of Health on that. So a lot of things are happening, and also I must say the government and the Ministry of Tourism have extended a series of relief measures to the tourism stakeholders to support them, like low interest loans to pay salaries of the employees so they can retain them, relief on electricity bill, water bill. So we're trying our best to make sure that they are sustained at the moment, because about 500,000 employees are dependent on this industry. So we are looking into developing within ourselves, to be honest, till we get international travelers. So we are trying to train our staff and provide more of a quality service and a product to the world.
Okay, Pani, thank you very much indeed. Jane, back to you in Shanghai at trip.com. Just very briefly, because we only just have a few more minutes left. As you look to the future, obviously we've heard about challenges, heard about opportunities. In a few words, what do you hope happens next? Where do you want things to go from here?
We are confident that the industry will advance. In Chinese, we said 危机. Normally, wherever there is a crisis, there is an opportunity. So stay innovative, stay customer focused. I'm sure we'll find a lot of new opportunities ahead of us.
And Jane, before I let you go, I asked all of our guests today to bring a personal item with them that to them symbolises travel and tourism and the importance of the revival. I'll let Pani off in Sri Lanka today because she's stood in at the last minute for our other guest that unfortunately couldn't make it. But Jane, what did you bring with you, and tell us about it?
Yeah, I brought a dolphin, a crystal dolphin. It's our mascot. The dolphin stands for, it travels around the world. And also when they hunt, they have teamwork together. And it's a very intelligent animal. I hope the dolphin will bring us all good luck for the global industry.
Okay, Jane, great. Thank you for bringing that along. I hope it's not too heavy. It looked quite heavy in front of you there. Flor, let's go to you in Brussels. I think you've brought something special as well.
Indeed. I will try to show you. It is not easy. And
Wow.
maybe, okay.
What is
you
it?
see it? It is sand. It is the sand. I don't know if you can see it.
But
It
you're
is
in
the
Brussels.
sand.
Where did you get the sand from?
Because I come from a very touristic area myself. I come from the Canary Islands, which is kind of Hawaii for the Europeans. And for me, tourism is not only an economic sector, it's a way of living. I grew up, the first international people I met in my life were tourists. And we are an island. We need aviation to be able to reach out and to connect. So for me, the sand of my beach that you see that is with me here in Brussels, it symbolizes the importance of tourism and the importance of aviation for the whole economy and for the opening of the mindset.
But I don't think you've got enough there to make a sandcastle, have you? I think you need to go back to the beach and get a bit more.
Indeed.
Thanks very much indeed, Flor. That was Flor Diaz-Pulido, the head of unit for aviation policy at the European Commission in Brussels. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. See
Great.
you.
We have Jane
Bye.
G. Sun, the Chief Executive Officer at Trip.com in Shanghai. Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Good luck with everything over there in China. And Pani, who stepped in kindly for Sri Lanka tourism over there in Sri Lanka, thank you very much indeed for your contribution as well.
No problem. No, also, I have our mascot, like we have it. This is an elephant. This is a gorgeous elephant we have. This is our mascot as well. Yeah,
Okay.
world famous Sri Lankan elephants. Yes.
Great. So hopefully people can get to see your mascot in person in the future when they travel.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, hopefully. Yes. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
So everybody, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and to our audience as well, thank you very much indeed for watching. It was very insightful, wasn't it, about the challenges and the opportunities ahead for travel to and between Asia and Europe as things start to get back to some sort of normality, but still quite clearly a long road ahead as well. This was the third in our special travel and tourism debates from Euronews. We've got another one coming up in just under 2 weeks or so, where we're going to be focusing on the links between Europe and Africa. So do tune in for that, and we'll be giving you more details on our social media channels over the coming days and coming weeks. For now, though, have a good day, and thanks indeed for watching.